Dr. Bernie Dahl is a licensed physician and board-certified pathologist who earned degrees in chemistry and Bible and MD from Cornell University and completed his pathology residency at the University of Vermont. Fresh out of serving as an Epidemic Intelligence Service Officer with the CDC in Atlanta, he was selected as Chief of Pathology at a medical center in Maine. During his successful 25-year career in the trenches of group medical practice and consultation, he became a published expert on leadership and strategic planning. Dr. Dahl took early retirement to focus on writing, speaking, and consultation. Having climbed high mountains throughout the world, he continued his mountaineering, an activity that nearly cost him his life. Rescued from near death, he lived to share his story entitled Lessons for Living from a Mount Washington Misadventure, wherein he shares the wisdom gained from this experience in a positive, motivational, inspirational, yet ecumenical message focused on 3 admonitions. Be prepared to die. Have a plan to live. Do it now. His story, which he reenacted for the Learning Channel's Storm Force series, is offered as a keynote and workshop and is adaptable to most any audience.
October 23rd, Mount Washington, New Hampshire. In the words of Bulwer Lytton, it was a dark and stormy night. It was perhaps the darkest and stormiest night of my life because I became close to 5 minutes from my death, because unbeknownst to me, my rescuers were about to give up. Yes, you are in a time of great change and perhaps in a time of great crisis. And the Chinese have a pictograph. They have their letters for the word crisis is a combination of 2 words, danger and opportunity. Now, this keynote is a process. It's not content. Brad was kind enough to share this with me last night. We talked at length about what your industry is going through. I do not know content. I know process, and that process is what I call strategic thinking and planning. Here's a map to give you an idea. Mount Washington, New Hampshire is not the highest mountain east of the Mississippi. Mount Mitchell in North Carolina is. But it has the pleasure of being at the crossroads of Canadian air, the air off the prairies, and the so-called perfect storm air off the Atlantic. So that's why it has some bad weather. 305 days a year, it's shrouded in clouds. It rained for 3 days. And even though Mark Twain had said, if you don't like the weather in New England, wait a few hours, it'll change. It rained for 3 days. All the rivers were flooded up there, even the tributaries way high up on Mount Washington. So I came back down again, went back up the very steep, up what's called Lion Head, and that looks like a lion's head when you're down on Route 16 looking up. And about this point, the rain changed to snow. Now, 6 promises I made. What promises would you make if you were near death or had a chance of coming back? These are the promises I made, to be insensitive to criticism. Why? The second thing is, this is crazy. Why would the second thing be to get rid of non-productive real estate? I had a lot of real estate, much of which was productive. That was my alternate career. Make amends with my first wife? Well, that's a hard thing to do. I did. I tried. And then clean up my life. Wow, that's an interesting promise. I do too many things. And then the next thing was to network past and present. The people in the first half of my life were teachers. They were my goddesses and gods. And the second part of my life were physicians and medical technologists, again, gods and goddesses. And then the last thing was to simplify my life, puts the whole thing together. These are the promises I made. What would you make in promises if you were faced with that? What about your life do you want to clean up? And then the follow-up, the news services, the Hudson College, Maine Public Broadcasting, National, and then Learning Channel, Keynotes, and then trilogies and a book. So I decided to write this, and the book started out to be Lessons for Living from Mount Washington Misadventure, and that's what the seminar was called. That's where these 3 things I'm going to talk about, these admonitions, that's where the promises came from. So I wrote the book. There was a trilogy. The first one started out to be What Better Place to Die, Mount Washington Misadventure. The second one was easier to write, The Optimize Your Life. That did very well, both nationally and internationally. And then the book that I'm just working on now, it's a small hand version, a friendlier version of all strategic planning. It's called Take Charge of Your Life, or Someone Else Will. You need to do 4 things for strategic planning. You have to have a mission statement. By me, a mission statement is what you do presently. A vision statement is what you want to do in the future. Then there's a SWOT analysis. This is probably the most important thing I can share with you people. And I changed SWOT to SCOT. Instead of weaknesses, I use challenges now in my stuff. But here is your outside world. This is the external opportunities and threats. This is the world of wireless communication. 1980s, the setting is IBM wants to go in the small computers. There were big mainframes, there were mini computers. I grew up with DEC, digital equipment. And then there was IBM and people toying with these personal computers, PCs. And there were 4 actors on the stage. There was Gary, who had digital research disk operating system. And then we had Steve, who owned a computer company. And you guys don't know, figure these people out, all except for one you won't figure out, I think. Bill had programming language, dropped out from a nice school in New England. And IBM, Big Blue, was the big actor here. And so what happens is, in first act, Bill meets with IBM and says, I'm a programming language person. You need to talk to Gary. Act 2, Gary doesn't show up. Gary doesn't like IBM. A lot of people don't like IBM. And what happens is he not only doesn't show up, he's not going to sign any deal. And then Act 3, Steve shows up. He's got a company that does everything, soup to nuts, the whole thing. I'm not going to share anything with IBM. So Bill comes along and he buys QDOS, which stood for Quick and Dirty DOS. He didn't have that kind of an operation. Buys it, renames it MS-DOS, which you know, and signs a deal with IBM. Now, what are the lessons? There's always 3 lessons at least to learn. 3-legged stool, show up. Number 1, Woody Allen says that 85% of success is simply showing up. 2 people wouldn't show up. Bill Gates showed up. He didn't have what they wanted, but he showed up. He got what they wanted. The customer is always right. IBM was right. They wanted to be in the PC business, and they wanted somebody else's software that would keep improving that software. And then the trouble with it is most of us focus on what we want to have, and a few of us focus on what we want to do, and very few people focus on what they want to be. And that's the hardest thing. That is the journey into the self. And what are my goals? Everything so far has been, we are convergent on who we are as far as our past. We're convergent, we're focused on our mission. When we went to vision, we could go crazy. We can not only do our personal life, business life, we can diverge, and all of a sudden now we're asked to converge. We're asked to boil this stuff down and prioritize it. Your goals have to be in concert. If they're not in concert, if you leave something out, you're going to be in big trouble. This is hard work. This has to be written down, because the human nature was such that we will forget what we said and we'll remember what we want to remember. You got to write this stuff down. We fear 2 things when we try to do new things. Number 1, we fear failure. It's an amazing number of people who fear success and what comes with it. Therefore, one can conclude that organizational strategic plan is, in effect, the merging of personal strategic planning of the key individuals involved in the organization.